Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we are actually doing something a little different. So, just with a flurry of scheduling issues, including a week-long trip to Mexico for me for a wedding, and now a week-long work event this upcoming week for me at work, we have just not really found many gaps in the schedules for us to get a full week of recording in, neither last week or this upcoming week. So, little bit of a difference here. This week, when you guys are seeing this episode, you will actually just be seeing our week 11 prediction episode. It'll still be going up on Thursday morning of week 11, just as it always does. But when we are recording right now when we are recording, it is actually Sunday the 10th, and we are only just after the noon game. So we don't really know not all of the outcome of the week 10 games. Still got a good number of games that we need to learn the outcome for. So, long story short, pretty much to sum it all up, what we're doing is there were no episodes last week, and this week there will be no recap episode, just a week 11 prediction episode. So, because of all kind of the mess up and we are scheduling conflicts, we're just going to hold off on doing any updates on the news or any updates on Cal and I's head-to-head pick'em points, and just leave that all till we get more on a regular schedule. But wanted to at least get our week 11 predictions out since we did have the time to get those knocked out quick. So before we get rolling into those week 11 predictions, I will real quick flash up the week 10 predictions now. We just got after the noon game, so some of those big games we already know what happened, including the Vikings game. Fun ending that we literally just watched in the Washington game. Washington barely taking that loss. But yeah, so that was our week 10 predictions. Now rolling into the week 11 predictions, starting with the Thursday night football game of the Washington Commanders heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. And for the first time, maybe this season, a very rare occurrence, we disagree on the Thursday night football game. I have the Commanders and Callan has the Eagles.
Yeah, I like the Eagles in this one because they're back at full strength. They got A.J. Brown back, Dallas Goedert back. Cooper DeJean is proving why he was a potential first-round pick and starting to really reignite that secondary. So I like the Eagles in this one to kind of overwhelm Jayden Daniels and kind of give him a bit of a reality check to kind of get him back down to earth, because he's had a superstar start to his career, and it more than likely won't continue. He just had a kind of a rough game against Pittsburgh where even though it was more on the defense for not giving him a chance to get the ball back, but he wasn't able to pull them back to the lead against Pittsburgh. So I think it'll be another tough one against Philly, where he does have a nice connection going with Terry McLaurin. I expect this to be more of a shootout because of the big playability now that Washington has found with Terry McLaurin and Jayden Daniels, and just the Eagles always being able to match that big playability with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I expect a big game from not only them, but also another big game from Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, certainly. Saquon is a scary man. But yeah, the Commies did just come off of a really tough loss last week against the Steelers. But I think that they're able to bounce back in this one because, I mean, they've played some pretty good teams and had some pretty big games. But this is Jayden Daniels' first real, prove it. You're facing the number one team in your division right now. This is where, if you want to be taken as a real quarterback, you got to win these games. And to be honest, I really think he does. I was not much of a believer in Jayden Daniels. I said it a lot during the draft prep. I said it at the beginning of the season. But he is definitely slowly but surely turning into a believer. I love the rest of the team around him. I've said that since the start of the season too. Terry McLaurin, that running back duo with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. All of those guys are some of my favorite players in the league. I just didn't know what they would be able to do with Jayden Daniels. But Jayden Daniels has nothing but proved me wrong since week one. And I really do think he continues to prove me wrong here. I think that I agree with Callan, I should say, that I think we see a total shootout here, which usually when we both say it's going to be a shootout, then it's some defensive stalwart.
Ends up 10-6.
Exactly. But I really do think it's going to be a shootout here. Probably come down to some sort of game-winning field goal. Definitely a one-possession game at least, I'd say. But I do see the Commies just barely eking out a huge divisional win there on Thursday Night Football. So moving down the list to a little bit with one of our two games we always talk about, starting with the Minnesota Vikings game. We have the said Minnesota Vikings heading down to Tennessee for another Southern road trip to take on the Titans. And we go back to agreeing here. We both have the Vikings on this one. They came off of a terrible week last week. That's one of the games we got to see. Sam Darnold threw not one, not two, but 3 red zone interceptions. Not even just interceptions, but red zone interceptions. To kind of put it in perspective how crazy that is, we had over 400 yards of total offense, which only resulted in 4 field goals. That's because we pretty much had 7 red zone trips with 0 touchdowns, 4 field goals, which is insane. Not all the field goals were red zone trips, but you kind of get what I'm saying with being in the opponent's territory so often. I saw a graphic about halfway through the game that we had more plays in opponent territory than the Jacksonville Jaguars did on offense, period. And we only resulted in 4 field goals. That sort of fluke does not happen twice in a row. And we're facing a team here in the Titans who are in a pretty similar situation to the Jaguars right now. Lots of injuries, lots of underperformance, a very poor record, and we're going into their home situation. So it's really funny because they're even both AFC South teams. So very similar weeks for the Vikings, 2 weeks in a row here. But I think that the only thing that's not similar about these 2 weeks is last week was a fluke of a bad week. And I think that this is more of a get-right game. So I do see the Vikings returning to earlier season form and kind of making a punching bag of the Titans here in this one.
Yeah, I expect the Vikings to win this one pretty easily. The Titans have really underperformed this year. I was really high on to start the season, and they just have not come up to expectations for me. Will Levis has been a disappointment. He is just not able to have a solid connection with really any of those wide receivers. He's starting to build one with Calvin Ridley, but it's very inconsistent. They traded away DeAndre Hopkins, who was probably their best offensive weapon left available. Now it's Calvin Ridley. So he had never had the chance to really build a connection with DeAndre Hopkins. And so because of that, I just expect the Vikings to pretty easily walk away with this one. That offensive line for the Titans is just terrible. And the Vikings' defensive pass rush is outstanding. And because of that, I expect them to really overwhelm Will Levis, get quite a number of sacks against him, and really probably force a couple turnovers also in a really dominant game for the Vikings. I expect them to win this one by a couple of possessions.
Yeah, the Vikings defense definitely returned to form against the Jaguars. No question on that one. So now moving on to the other game we always talk about with the Green Bay Packers. And again, with the aforementioned Packers on the road heading to Chicago this time for an NFC North matchup. And we agree again here. We both have the Packers in this one. The Bears just looked horrific last week. Everything I said about the Vikings, even worse, the Bears were. They got picked apart by the New England Patriots, who surely were not a good team either. I mean, at least the Vikings defense was able to make up for the woes of the offense, but the Bears offense and defense did not lean on each other at all. They both absolutely fell apart against a not very good team. I love Drake May. He's opposite Jaden Daniels. He's been my guy from the start, so I was really happy to see him have a big game. But that's the Patriots. That's a different team. Back to the Bears. I think that less than the Packers even win this game. I think that the Bears just absolutely lose this game, because every time I've thought that the Bears had a bad game and then they were going to kind of have a get-right game or a comeback game, it hasn't really happened. Maybe that London game was their best game of the season, but they haven't been able to recreate that performance again, which once we're in week 10, week 11 now, you should be able to recreate that performance again if it's going to happen. You can't truly have it be a once in every 6, once in every 7 week fluke. And I think that the Packers are just way too good of a team to have that return performance again. So, I mean, even if they do have a return performance, I don't know if they win. So with the fact that I don't think they have a return performance, I think the Packers have this one handily.
Yeah, the Packers should have this one pretty single-handedly in the bag, but boy, am I a little bit scared of the Bears because a team coming off that bad of a performance is just more than likely going to have a better performance the following week. The Bears just put up no points, a single field goal last week, and that was it. For a team with that much offensive firepower, when you talk about Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, their running back, DeAndre Swift, there should be more points on the board. And because of that, I do expect the Packers to win this one, but I think it's going to be closer than people think because the Bears are going to come out with a really strong performance. This is the Bears Super Bowl, if you want to put those in quotations, because they're kind of heading in the wrong direction of the win-loss record. So they're playing themselves out of the playoffs. And this is really their chance to get back into the NFC North division. But because the Bears are the Bears, I expect them to find a way to lose this game. And maybe the Packers slip away with another walk-off field goal.
Yeah, definitely. This has trap game written all over it, and the divisional ones are always hard to pick, but I agree. I just don't see a world where the Packers drop this one. So now moving down the list quite a bit to our game of the week and what is pretty much game of the year every year at this point with this kind of rivalry that these two teams have built. We have the Kansas City Chiefs on the road heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills, and we disagree here. I have the Chiefs in this one, and Callan has the Bills as his upset.
I like the Bills in an upset here, and to give the Chiefs their very first loss on the year this upcoming week. I like the Bills because of Josh Allen, and I can say this over and over. He is one of the most phenomenal quarterbacks in the league this year, and really for the last few years. He's one of the most dynamic players in the NFL, and he puts on that hero cape and plays hero ball, and I expect him to do it again. And also, he's got a winning record against the Chiefs in the regular season. Now, he is, I believe, 0-3 in the playoffs against the Bills, or against the Chiefs, Josh Allen is. But I believe against the Chiefs, he has a couple of wins in the regular season. So I expect the Bills to pick up another regular season win against the Chiefs and let the Dolphins pop that, or the 72 Dolphins pop their champagne and keep them as their only perfect team in the NFL.
I was going to say, not have to worry about that undefeated season. But yeah, I completely agree. I almost picked the Bills in this one solely because if the Bills beat the Chiefs, it's in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
But I went back to the Chiefs on this one because they are the first team since maybe like the New England Patriots dynasty that I've seen win in not 3 phases of the game, but in 4 phases of the game. They can win on offense, they can win on defense, they can win on special teams, and they even got those damn refs helping them win the game. Now, the refs, I'll be honest, this year, not as bad as past years, have been kind of being questionable with the Chiefs. I think that the Chiefs have truly won a lot more of the wins this year, even on special teams, as we kind of saw last week with them getting that blocked field goal last second against the Broncos in order to stay undefeated. So if any team is going to beat the Chiefs right now, outside of like a fluke, it probably is the Bills. But I just can't commit to that. I think the Chiefs are just too good of a team right now. I think that this is a game of the year candidate. I mark that before it even happens. But I think that this is a hell of a game that comes down to a field goal, maybe even 1 point as like a missed extra point or something crazy like that somewhere. But I do think
missed extra points.
I do think that the Chiefs are able to go on the road and just barely sneak out a win against a really hot Bills team right now. So now moving on to our primetime games with Sunday Night Football and the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. And we disagree again here. I have the Chargers in this one, and Callan takes the Bengals.
I like the Bengals in this one because, boy, is Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase getting hot. Last week, they put up almost 300 yards. Jamar Chase put up almost 300 receiving yards. Joe Burrow had another 4 touchdowns. And, boy, I believe Jamar Chase had 2, if not 3 of those touchdowns.
3, yep.
So he had 3 of them, yep. So he had huge numbers, almost damn near record-setting numbers. And I expect that connection to carry over and for them to really overwhelm the Los Angeles Chargers this week. I expect that running game to get back on track with Chase Brown really showing that he's really taken that starting role by the reins and really shown that he can be a starting running back in the NFL. He didn't have his best game last week, but he had a touchdown. So when you can rely on for at least a touchdown a week, that's pretty good. But because of that, I expect the Bengals to win this one, even though I will say the Chargers have done quite well this year. And even though they haven't played yet while we're recording this, I do expect them to win this week or last week against the Titans, and it could put them into second place in the AFC West. So they do have a strong record, and I expect the Chargers to put up a really tough fight. But I like the Bengals to walk away with this one and another possible shootout.
Yeah, there is no doubt that the Bengals, or Bengals in general, but especially that connection between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is hot right now.
Mm-hmm.
But one kind of caveat or one counter I have to that is their connection is not consistent. It goes really hot for a while, but it never, you rarely see it really span out between a lot of different weeks. There's usually at least a couple quiet weeks in there. So after having that monstrous game he did in Thursday Night Football last week, I see Chase not having like a bad game by any means, like getting completely shut down. I don't like see him going over 100 yards or getting maybe more than one touchdown. And I think that the Chargers are able to take advantage of that. They have looked really good recently. And like, as Callan said, they're playing right now. So we don't know if they actually did end up beating, I think, the Titans this week. But they are a team that are seeing green in the fact that they actually have a playoff chance right here. They've had a couple of really disappointing years in a row that led to them not making the playoffs. And now they see themselves in an opportunity to put themselves in the position and put themselves in the driver's seat for a wild card spot and maybe even the top wild card spot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see them passing up the Chiefs and getting their division, but I could easily see them picking up that 5th seed in the AFC right now, just with how other teams are doing, especially if they can beat one of the teams in that 5th seed race with the Cincinnati Bengals. So they finally got some hope. And I say it all the time that the Chargers are the Vikings of the AFC. And I know from being a Vikings fan my whole life, if this were the Vikings, they'd win this game, they'd get the 5th seed, and then they'd fall apart in the wild card. So I think that's exactly what the Chargers are going to do. Pick up a huge win here, end up winning the 5th seed and losing in the wild card. But that's a little more in the future. Talking about this game, I do have them beating the Bengals.
Yeah, let's not talk about playoffs yet.
Hey, we're getting
there.
We're getting closer.
I hate.
Oh God, I don't like it either.
It's almost over. It
It
is fun.
It's coming up fast,
but
it's fast. I mean, when you have to start talking about the playoff bracket and it feels like we've barely even seen football, like it feels like we're barely into the season.
Just getting in the gist of it.
It's so sad, but it is probably almost as fun as the playoffs is watching the playoff brackets develop. So that's one silver lining to it. So now for our final game this week, another game that has some big playoff implications, at least for one of the teams in it, depending on how the rest of the season goes. We have a Monday Night Football matchup with the Houston Texans heading to Dallas to take on the Cowboys, and we finish off by agreeing here. We both have the Texans in this one. And of course, the main reason I picked the Texans here is not even because the Texans have been on a hot streak or because the Texans have looked like this unbeatable team, but the Cowboys have just been on the dead opposite. They have been hitting a cold streak. They've looked like a defeated team, and now they're a defeated team without their starting quarterback. Dak Prescott was placed on injured reserve. It's actually even more looking like he's going to undergo season-ending injury, which will put them at either having Cooper Rush, who they're starting this week. They're playing right now, so we don't know how that game turned out or how Cooper Rush played. But they did start Cooper Rush last week, technically, when you'll be seeing this. Maybe we see Trey Lance at some point through that game. Maybe if Cooper Rush doesn't play well, we see Trey Lance start in this game against the Texans. Who knows exactly what they do with quarterback, but at the end of the day, they don't have their starting quarterback, and they're going against a team who has their starting quarterback, who's a promising young rookie, a very stellar defense across the board, and even though a beat up, a still very good and very deep wide receiver corpse, not to mention one of the better running backs in the league right now is Joe Mixon. So there's just way too much stacked against Dallas. I see the Texans getting a win.
Yeah, I like the Texans in this one because, well, the Cowboys have really been, if not for the Jets, they'd probably be the dumpster fire of the year this year.
Really
they definitely are the dumpster fire of the NFC.
Yeah.
So we'll see how well, if they lose last week or, we'll see how that game turns out. They could fire McCarthy. You could really see what, they could really be looking forward to next year with Dak Prescott being out for the year. They could kind of wave the white flag on the season and fire McCarthy and look towards next year and building towards the future. But I like the Texans in this one because of CJ Stroud and the return of Nico Collins, who will be coming off injured reserve, I believe, last week. But if not last week, then this week for sure. So I expect that connection to start right up where it left off with Nico Collins putting up nearly record numbers and damn near MVP style numbers for those first couple of weeks for a wide receiver at least. So we'll see if that can continue, him coming off that hamstring injury, if that hampers him at all. So if it does not, I expect the Texans to walk away with this one pretty easily. But if the Cowboys do put up a fight, I still expect the Texans to walk away with this one, maybe on the game-winning field goal or a late touchdown drive.
The New York Jets stealing the dumpster fire crown from the Dallas Cowboys is something that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card to start the season. In fact, a lot of people had those two teams being some of the best teams in their conference to start the season. And now they're fighting for bottom of the barrel. That is crazy to think about. But it just shows how unpredictable the NFL is and how injuries can derail a team big time. These teams didn't even really get derailed by injuries. They were even dumpster fires when they were healthy. But still, it just shows how
that's
crazy
how
the
dumpster
NFL
fire
is.
starts. When you're healthy and you're still losing games in dramatic fashion,
And then you get injured, then
and
it's
then
just
get hurt. It's just
everything's burning. That's a dumpster fire that starts the building it's against on fire, and just the whole thing all goes to hell. But we'll see if the Cowboys or the Jets are able to turn around and steal any wins last week or this week. But thank you all so much for watching this episode, and thank you all so much for sticking with us with this chaotic schedule we have going on. But next week, we should have our Week 11 recap and Week 12 predictions, just as we always do for the 2024 NFL season. So like I said, really appreciate the support and all the understanding through this. But until next week, don't forget
to eat the W.